Hey guys, it's Mel. I want to talk some more about the INTJ mind, and specifically about emotions. Now I know what you're thinking. I thought INTJs didn't have emotions. It is pretty much the public opinion that INTJs exist as heartless robots. We're kind of chasing after logic with complete disregard as we trample all over everyone else's feelings. And in the fictional universe, a lot of times you're going to see characters that are typed as INTJs as cold, aloof, and more often than not, a supervillain, mad scientist, or evil genius type. And while there's a lot of truth that comes from those stereotypes, INTJs are not emotionless. We are not heartless. We're just processing those emotions at a different pace and in a different way than other people are. So how do INTJs deal with emotions? One of the analogies that I use a lot, and I use a lot of analogies as an INTJ, is that the INTJ mind is like a computer. And in today's environment, our computers and all of our devices are connected to the internet. The internet is a super highway of information. Now, the INTJ mind is also always on the highway of information. We live to collect data, but we are looking for the raw, factual data so that we can make the best, most efficient decisions on everything. And we want to evaluate all of that data from every perspective without having anything hinder us. So enter the emotions. The emotions hinder our data. It's potentially hazardous because emotions create bias in other instances which can infect our data and cause us to not have the most effective and efficient and logical solution to a problem. So we need to deal with the potential hazard in the right manner. So just like a computer has antivirus software running in the background, the INTJ mind is processing information and scanning it, looking for potentially hazardous or misinformation, and we're scanning all of the data we put in our brain just like the antivirus software, except it's kind of an anti-emotion scanner. So we find data that has emotional components to it, and we detach the emotion and quarantine it the same way that the antivirus software is going to quarantine an email attachment that looks suspicious. And then you can deal with it later in its quarantine state, but it keeps that from infecting all of your other information and, worst case scenario, damaging and destroying your device. The INTJ does not want their mind destroyed. It's our most important asset. So it's important to protect it from any kind of malicious content. And that's what we're doing. We're detaching the emotion so that we can evaluate it because we don't want it to infect all of our data. And we definitely don't want it damaging our reputation as making effective and logical decisions. So everything goes into the box. Now, a real-world example of how this works would be if somebody calls me up and says, "Hey Mel, I need to let you know your Uncle Joe passed away today." My reaction to that is not going to be immediately emotional like a lot of people would be. Again, the process is that I'm going to accept the factual data, but detach the emotion and quarantine it. So I'm going to say thank you for letting me know and accepting that data that Uncle Joe is dead, but all of my feelings, whatever they are, that have been stirred up by this information, I'm setting aside to deal with later. I'm going to focus on the information, and if there are any kind of problems or, anything logistically that I need to take care of. So I may get off the phone immediately and just thank them for letting me know, depending on the situation, depending on how close I am to my hypothetical Uncle Joe. I may ask a barrage of questions in typical INTJ fashion. If the death is sudden, I may ask a ton of questions about how it happened. Again, trying to get all of the raw data so that I can process that and have thoughts of my own outstanding from everyone else. I may go down a road of asking about, all of the aftermath. If I know that Uncle Joe was a widower and he has no children, I could ask questions about his estate and his funeral arrangements, and do I need to get on board and do anything, and those type of things. Again, the INTJ is probably going to be perceived by whoever is on the other end of that phone call as being completely cold and not having cared about Uncle Joe, which is not true. I have emotions that are attached to my uncle, but I am not having emotional outbursts upon hearing the information. I am going to take the raw factual data and I'm going to process that before I process the emotions, because I want to quarantine the emotions. I don't want the emotions affecting the way that I initially process the data. Now, most people are going to view that, again, the INTJ is cold-hearted, and that's some kind of weakness, some kind of hole in our personality that we need to fix, and we need to be more people-oriented, and we need to learn how to be kinder to people. But honestly, I think that this is actually one of our greatest strengths, and pretty much is the INTJ superpower that allows us to be masterminds. But other people are evaluating our ability to detach emotionally in different manners, because people are emotional and are making decisions and coming to conclusions with emotions attached to them, which is influencing their thoughts. And that is creating this idea that we're cold and robotic. When in reality, in other situations, they champion the fact that we were able to do that. Case in point, if there's a big emergency situation and everybody freaks out in hysteria and shock and they don't know what to do, your INTJ is probably going to be the person who stands up and directs people and takes initiative to solve problems and take care of business, and there's probably going to be a long list. So if the workplace burns down and everybody's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe all this happened, the INTJ's got a clipboard and 50 things that we should have done differently in order for this not to happen. That's where we are. Our mind is with the data, and we're processing everything that is happening and focused on solving problems, and not only solving problems, so we want to solve problems before they happen, and we want to identify potential problems, before even that. So again, we could solve them before they happen. And our focus is on all of that data, and we've just isolated the emotions. So it is a huge benefit. And one of the ways that I know I've seen it a lot, and people will be offensive again, is when you go into a large group of people, particularly in a brainstorm session type of environment, that the INTJ is going to be the one who plays devil's advocate. I'm going to play devil's advocate for everything. Every idea that comes up, I'm going to poke holes in it all day long. Again, trying to find potential problems so that you can solve them before they become a problem. And it allows you to find the most viable solution to anything. So if we need to have a brainstorm session because we're going to have to replace a huge system at work, the INTJ is going to be the person who can go into that conference room without being attached to anything, We don't care who's in that room. If they're coworkers, if they're people above us, if it's CEO of a company, if it's CEO of other companies, if they're vendors that we potentially buy products from, we don't care. And unless you have beat it into us that we need to be politically correct and not act like ourselves, we are going to treat everyone in that room the same. We are going to give honest feedback in the same manner to every one of those people. And we are going to, well, other people are going to call it attack, but we're going to vet every idea the same way. And other people might feel attacked in the way that we do it, but we are doing it with purpose, and we're doing it without being emotionally attached to it. We don't care who likes what idea or what's been done before, or if some new executive is coming in and they want to change stuff for the sake of change so they can stamp their name on it. We care about none of those things. We want to find the most effective solution, and we want to evaluate every potential solution from every possible angle so that we can make the best decision. And all those emotional attachments of whether so-and-so's idea, if somebody likes it or doesn't like it, or what's been around a long time, or what other people are using and what the trend is, all of these things are irrelevant to the INTJ, because we're just focused on the data and finding the solution, because we are focused more holistically on the long-term future than probably everybody else in the room. Sally may be sitting in there and she's worked there for 40 years and done something the same way forever, and she really likes the way she does things and doesn't want to change, and that weighs very heavily on her decision. But I don't care, because Sally is not going to be working there 20 years from now, 40 years from now. So whether or not she likes it is irrelevant to finding the best solution. And that's where you see that ability to detach from the emotions as not only a strength, but kind of a superpower, because we're the ones that are able to do that. And we are able to sit back and make our proposals and to vet ideas and to do it without being influenced by all of those little emotional things that can drag us in different directions. One of the other things that the INTJ is going to focus on when dealing with their emotions is that they don't want to share them with anyone else. Again, we're trying to protect our information. We're trying to protect our device, our brain, from any kind of infiltration and potential destruction. We also want to protect our reputation as being logical decision makers. And by allowing people to see us in some kind of emotional fit, that compromises the way that everybody views us, and potentially the way that they view our decisions and our ideas. And we don't want that. So we're going to focus on isolating those emotions and dealing with them privately away from everyone else where nobody sees it, which contributes to the stereotype that we are robots because nobody else gets to see it. It's hidden behind closed doors. One of the things that the INTJ is also able to do is, because we've set it in the box and we will deal with it at an appointed time, we will schedule an appointed time to do so. And I don't know, you can let me know in the comments, anybody who agrees, disagrees. Are there other personality types that do this too? But you can relate to me, other INTJs, right? Like that you can schedule time to cry, that like, okay, back to my hypothetical Uncle Joe, he died and I have to deal with that, but I deal with everything else and the funeral or whatever I have to do, and comforting family, and whenever I get through all of that stuff that I have to do that I don't want to do, that I'll be like, okay, well, I'm sad and I'll think about this for a while, so next Tuesday when I have some free time, I'll have a little cry session, and then I'll be done with it and we'll move on. We'll remove those emotions and thought from the quarantine box. Let them go. We're not going to store them with the data unless there's some reason for that. But you have to process the emotions out of the box so that you can leave room for the next ones that are going to inevitably come along, because we're emotional beings and everyone else is. So all the data that we're taking in is coming from other people, and there's always going to be like these little emotional attachments to things that we have to work through and process. I know I am not the greatest example of processing emotions. I have learned a lot of that, especially over the last few years in dealing with that. And part of the reason was that I was forced to do it, because I will tell you there are two things that happen if you do not, take the appropriate actions to work through the emotions inside of that box in the right amount of time. And that's that the box gets full, right? And so there's two ways that the box can be pressurized. One is that there's just so much pressure and all of these things crammed in the box that it can't contain one more emotion that you try to shove in there, and the pressure just explodes and you have like this absolute explosive emotional outburst. The other way is that you just keep pressing and pressing and pressing, and it's kind of like a wine press, and you squishing grapes and they're just kind of like oozing out. And then the emotional outbursts kind of drag on for a long period of time in little spurts. And this has happened to me a lot, especially when I'm under a lot of duress, when I am stressed and depressed and I just am not myself at all. And any little thing could trigger tears or other emotions like on a dime, and I don't appear to be myself at all. And I don't, like, in any instance like that, people will probably be like, you are not an INTJ for sure. But the fact of the matter is, like, I was completely unhealthy and very stressed out and under a lot of pressure INTJ. And the problem that led to me having this emotional outburst is because of the fact that I have previously put all of these emotions into this box that I haven't dealt with. And when that happens, when I start crying involuntarily at a work meeting or something that is completely embarrassing, I am not really crying about what is happening in that moment. Like, there is actually a whole lot of other stuff that's connected to it and behind the scenes, and it's seeping out of the box. And unfortunately, it becomes so much harder to deal with when I do try to open the box and deal with it, because I pressurized all those emotions so much that now they're all stuck together and I don't even know what's what, and they're all mushy and dripping everywhere and touching everything. And it is a huge hazard, because that's what I was trying to avoid in the first place, right? We quarantined them so that they wouldn't affect all of the other data. But if your mind has all these emotions that are compacted, now you've run a huge risk of the fact that everything that's quarantined in there now can contaminate all of your information and all of your actions. So it's very important to deal with them. And that is my advice to all my fellow INTJs out there, that if you don't already do that, make it a priority to learn to get better at it. Because unfortunately we're humans like everybody else, and we still have emotions as much as we try to outrun them. And pretty much all of the data that we take in from other humans is going to have some kind of emotional attachment with it that we have to deal with as well, that we have to process and isolate. So it's important to learn to do that effectively and in a timely fashion. And if you struggle with this, I know that I have. I advise finding somebody that you trust that you can share them with. I don't think that the INTJ is ever going to be comfortable being in a group environment. I hate funerals. For the longest time, I didn't understand their purpose. And now having people explain that to me, and the processing of grief and how it helps people to go through that, it makes sense, but it doesn't have the same effect on me. Just like, going into some kind of group therapy 12-step program, everybody sits in a circle, sings Kumbaya, and shares their feelings, doesn't have the same kind of effect on me. It's more of a personal, private thing, but when you need assistance in learning how to do it, it can be very helpful to be one-on-one with a spouse, with a best friend, with a mentor, with a counselor, and find yourself and your ability to open the box and feel the feelings as much as you don't want to, so that you can move on, so that you can file them accordingly, destroy the things that we don't need, but hang on to some of them because they will help you the next time around. Some of that information can actually be very beneficial, especially if we learn to identify emotions from other people and ourselves, that we can better understand them the next time that we see them. So there is some merit to these emotions. But the INTJ, yeah, we're gonna set them aside and deal with them later. We are not gonna allow them to interrupt our thought process. So those are my thoughts on INTJs and emotions. Let me know what you think in the comments. My fellow INTJs out there, if you can relate to some of these things, if you disagree with any of them. I'm kind of interested to know too if there is a difference here between male and female INTJs, but it's probably more of a perception thing. Again, that stereotype of being heartless and robotic can be a little harder on female INTJs because of the stereotype for women to be nurturers in our society. So I'm interested and excited about this, and thanks again for watching my video, and I look forward to chatting with you next time.